I think there's no doubt that there is a transformation taking place back home in India. India probably was never what you would call a Western liberal democracy in the sense that, freedom of speech in India always tended to be a little bit more restricted and curtailed than, say, in the United States or in parts of Europe. But I think that most indices that are put out by different universities, think tanks, institutes around the world, the WeDem Institute in Sweden or Freedom House here in Washington, everybody sort of agrees that there has been an erosion of free speech in India over the last few years. And India's rankings and ratings have been falling. So that is, I think, generally there is a universal consensus on that, across different indices around the world. I think you've got to remember that, first of all, India is the most populous country in the world today, and internet penetration has been growing very rapidly in the last few years. And it's still growing, and so it's a market that has not reached saturation. More and more people are getting on the internet back in India. But what makes India even more important, I think, is the fact that Twitter is banned in China, and China has got its great firewall. It has its own version of the internet. It has its own social media platforms, and so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Google and other big tech companies operating out of the United States tend to depend a lot more heavily on the Indian market. But I think on the other side of the table, you've also got to be fairly certain that the Indian establishment as well and India's ruling party, the BJP, has also used these social media platforms quite adeptly for political and electoral processes. And so in the absence of Twitter and other social media platforms, Facebook, WhatsApp, what have you, there is going to also be a significant loss on the part of the BJP and its election machine or its political machine, so to speak. It will become that much less capable and that much less invincible in a sense in its propaganda, and that much less effective in domestic politics. So it's a win-win relationship in some sense. It's not just that Twitter is in India at the mercy of the Indian government. I think that it is a relationship that tends to be a lot more symbiotic than one might think. I think we've got to be sure that what Jack Dorsey has said is not new news. Everybody has been sort of talking about this for a while. I think different social media platforms have been, sort of grappling with it. We had an incident with Facebook a few years ago where, one of its leading executives in the India office, was essentially fired, I think, or she resigned from her position at Facebook. Because there was a scandal about how partisan she was and how she was using Facebook's content moderation policies and tools in order to sort of suppress dissent and then play up voices that are kind of more pro-establishment or partisan in nature. So it is something that has been around, and social media platforms have been talking about it for a while now. But the problem is that, as I said, in the absence of access to the Chinese market and the fact that India's market is still growing, a lot of these social media platforms can't really afford to cut their operations off in India. And as far as Twitter is concerned, I think that now that it's in the hands of Elon Musk has sort of initiated and instituted a transformation in the way that Twitter runs itself. And part of that has to do with the fact that Elon Musk also does have other business interests outside of Twitter. And so recently he went to China. China is a country where Twitter is banned, but Tesla, which is this other major firm, thrives and does pretty well in the electrical vehicle market. And so, somebody did ask Elon Musk on Twitter about, how you talked about the fact that you're a free speech absolutist and all of that. Why are you still sort of pandering to governments in countries like Turkey and China and other sort of either liberal democracies or outright autocracies? And, he said, quite frankly, paraphrasing here, that he has to work with the world that he has. He kind of has to contend with the political realities on the ground as they exist, and that he's not in a position to change it. So Elon Musk has shown a stronger willingness really to sort of engage with governments that tend to be not so much pro free speech as America and its allies in Europe might like. That's part of how the framework of social media and the way that Twitter is operating around the world is also itself changing. I think India also needs to be careful about what this means for its perception as an investment destination, because major tech firms have been investing in India for a long period of time. And it's a large part of India's service sector and its growth potential, its ability to create jobs for a workforce that just keeps growing every year. And so, the fact that there are major CEOs or executives at these tech firms talking about potential political interference from the government, policing and censorship of what they say, what they write, how their employees behave, and so on and so forth. That doesn't really add to its ease of doing business initiatives, and it doesn't add to Mr. Modi's efforts to present India as an attractive investment destination. So it has larger, I think, broader economic repercussions as well that India has to be a lot more aware of. Part of that obviously is the fact that a number of these indices, as I was saying at the start of my talk, a number of these global indices have been downgrading India's democracy, India's free speech and protection of different freedoms and liberties. And all of that tends to create a picture that I think can discourage investors from bringing their money into India and expanding their operations in India. India has to take that concern a lot more seriously as well for its own economic development and well-being.